Hello, 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 hello. It's good to see you. Say hello.
Welcome to the Huskies Hockey Podcast, and let's just say it was a weekend to forget for your Huskies men's women's team. But I don't know where we're at. I don't know where you're at. I feel like I've learned a lot about this team, kind of going forward. So I will kind of start it off right there. And just any, I don't know. I was stuck. I didn't know how to start this podcast because obviously getting kicked in the teeth on the men's and the women's side. But I do have a new whiskey here, so I don't know. Maybe I continue with my whiskey around the world, so I can feel something, some type of joy as we start this podcast.
Sounds wonderful. Where are we drinking today?
Where are we drinking? We are going to Denmark.
Great Danes. Yes.
And this is the first rye whiskey. So this is a little bit different. You definitely get that rye on the nose, and it's a nice little color. So I'll go ahead and give it my first sip.
Here we go. Gives it a nice healthy sip. He's marinating in it.
Ooh, hey. Hello, darling. There we go. Yeah, I like the nose. The first, the first taste, it was pretty, and then it builds the flavor, and then at the end you get that rye spice there at the end. So I think this one takes over the Peruvian whiskey as the top whiskey from around the world.
Do we have a rating? I think that was 7.1, I think was the Peruvian. So higher than that.
Yep. I would say this is a 7.9.
7.9.
7.9. Yep. This is, I guess I'm ripping off. Am I ripping off Portnoy here? Am I ripping off one bite? Everyone knows the rules. Is this one sip?
It's got a good undercarriage, I think.
One sip. Everyone knows the rules. So, and then I also have a beer for a little bit later, and I went with Castle Danger because
you can't get enough Duluth. Well, that's not Duluth technically.
Yeah,
it's Two Harbors.
It's the same. It's all relative.
That would only offend people that live in Two Harbors.
I think so.
It's kind of like people that hate from the Dakotas who hate the term the Dakotas.
Is that a thing? Do they really hate that term? Huh?
Aren't your folks? Don't they have South Dakota in them? My dad's from there originally, Watertown. They think that is a thing. They don't like it when people lump the two together.
Oh, my dad got a job and was the city manager in Yankton, South Dakota for about 3 years, and then went to Brookings, the People's Republic of Brookings, and was there for about 12 years. So, yeah, I mean, they've spent a healthy amount of time in South Dakota, but they actually divided up more versus East River versus West River. So they always so it wasn't much of like the Dakotas,
right?
But It was more like those West River folk. If you go, they're weird over there. So
yeah, I know that's a thing, but there is a sectional divide in South Dakota in itself. I don't know if that's the same in North Dakota. Do they care about where the Missouri River is and? Does that split the state? I don't know. It's kind of the same deal there, where most of their population is shoved right on the side of Minnesota, and then the western part of the state is largely nothing picturesque, but not much in terms of population.
Theodore Roosevelt's absolutely gorgeous.
Badlands.
I should ask my wife. My wife went to college there in Jamestown, so I guess I should ask her if.
She didn't go to St. Cloud State?
Oh, no. Okay. Actually,
for some reason I thought that you guys met in college. I thought she was a Husky.
No,
so you have taught. She is a trained Husky fan, not natural.
actually, looking up in my office here next to my St. Cloud State diploma that's framed is her Minnesota State University. She got her master's at Minnesota State, or she completed her 4-year at Minnesota State.
Minnesota State meaning Mankato State?
Mankato, yep.
Okay. We still call it Mankato State.
So just really.
But
really
where did she do her undergrad? North Dakota School of Mines? Where was it?
No, it was Jamestown College.
Jamestown College.
Which they're called the Jimmies. And yes, they do sell Jimmy hats there. It's a hat that says Jimmy's on it. So I do get a kick out of that.
Well, I did not know that. Again, I thought that she was St. Cloud State as well.
No,
but
nope. She got a degree in actually in history, and really close to a double major as well. But went back into nursing, and then got her AA degree. Went to nursing, and then to further her career because politics. Even though you take the same boards, you have to.
Did she do that? Where did she do the AA?
Oh man, she's gonna be ticked.
I don't want to put you on the spot. You can.
Right. I'm gonna go with North Hennepin.
Okay. That was smarter than me, who also did history as an undergrad, but didn't do anything smart in terms of finding something that I could actually get a job in.
That's pretty much.
So she was smarter. Yeah. Newsflash. Teresa is smarter than I am.
And now she works for Centricare right now, and loves her job. So and I love her, and I love her job and everything that goes with it. So.
All right, we're all lovey-dovey here.
We're all lovey-dovey here because the next hour or so, probably more, is going to be just a crap.
It's all
fest.
Downhill from here.
It's all. So if you want a roast of pretty much every aspect of hockey, let's start it off with the men here. Let's roll the recap.
The Huskies men visit UMD in Duluth, where the Huskies have lost 6 of their last 7 games versus the Bulldogs. Can the Huskies reverse the trend? Friday's action starts with St. Cloud getting 2 power plays in the first 10 minutes. However, the Huskies can't do anything with the man advantage, and the game remains scoreless through 1 period. Max Plant gets the scoring started at 16:42 of the second period, tipping in an Aaron Pionk shot past Huskies goaltender Gavin Enright. Huskies have the faceoff advantage over Duluth, but the Bulldogs outshoot the Huskies in each frame, and Will Gallatin ices the game with an empty netter with 28 seconds left, and the Bulldogs shut out the Huskies 2-0. Goalie Clayton Knapp picks up his first collegiate shutout for UMD, and the Bulldogs shut out the Huskies for the first time in 134 matchups, dating back to February of 1993. The Bulldogs go for their 3rd straight sweep of the Huskies on home ice on Saturday. The Huskies get into penalty trouble early, and Jason Shagabe converts right after Gavin Thornton's penalty ends at 12:57 of the first period to give Duluth a 1-0 lead. It gets worse for St. Cloud in the second period when World Juniors alum Adam Kleber notches his first NCAA goal at the 7-minute mark, and Dominic James picks up his 10th goal of the year just over a minute later, and all of a sudden it's 3-0 Bulldogs. Damon Gardner would get the Huskies off the schneid just 12 seconds later, and then Tyson Gross pops in a power play goal at 12:52 of the second period, and you got a game again at 3-2. But Max Plant would get his second of the weekend at 17:57 of the second with the man advantage, and Joey Pierce's first goal in his 81-game collegiate career early in the third period gives UMD a 3-goal lead for the second time in the game. Garbage time sees some chippiness and ill temper between the two teams, and St. Cloud can only muster 22 shots on goal all night. Duluth completes the sweep with a 5-2 win, and the Huskies drop to 6th place in the NCHC standings.
Andrew, I kind of teased it earlier. I learned a lot about this team, and I'm officially a seller. Like, from what this weekend I've seen from them, and I just have no hope for them going forward. And it was from the start, we had a couple power play chances, didn't do anything with it on that Friday game. But after that, it was just a lackluster performance all weekend up in Duluth. And it's just frustrating to go to Amsoil all the time and just see us crap out there.
We said this was going to be very cheery. this segment of the show. So you said that you learned a lot and that you're out on
I'm out.
NCAA aspirations.
And the thing is, I'm not even hitting the panic button. Like we're past the point of panic, in my opinion.
Remind you that
done.
both of us last week picked them to make the NCAA
Correct.
tournament.
No,
last week,
I have
7 days ago.
I'm usually I'm not this far gone. I feel at least I'm a little more level-headed when it comes to things along these lines and ebbs and flows of the season. But not only can we not score, but our decision making is terrible. Nobody looks to be on the same page, and I've got no faith that somebody's going to all of a sudden flip the switch and start producing for this team. Like I'm past panic now, and just my dagba is just to acceptance. And what's more frustrating for me is last year when I hit the acceptance, it was like, I see what we're building towards. I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for what's coming in. Right now, I don't know. I just feel lost. I feel like Tom Hanks in Castaway, like just, and like my Wilson volleyball.
That was the movie where
Tom
Hanks was a castaway. For those who don't know the plot.
Oh yes, for that. That was, thanks for the IMDb synopsis there to make sure. I appreciate it. So it's just like my Wilson floating ball is like just an aging Enright. Like, I guess it's a cute story that he's got going, and I thought he actually played pretty well there on Friday, but it was just disheartening to see the effort from the Huskies this weekend.
I've certainly got a lot to say. It seems like you're on a roll, though. So you said that you learned a lot about this team. What else did you learn that made you come to this decision? Like, give me some more talking points here. Is there any other players that you sort of change an opinion about? Keep going. I like where you're going.
Well, the biggest thing that I am perplexed by, and you put it out on X as well, about the Thorsten Sulquist Ports line, about it. I believe you said hell or high water. And at this point, Larson is just trying to pound sand to make a diamond. And it's just like, that's not going to happen for many different reasons. Because I should have used coal. Like, I realized that right as I was going through. Sand makes glass or something. In Minecraft, it does anyway. But anyway, like, it's just the inability to try something new. I mean, the old stupid adage about, what Einstein says is the definition of insanity is trying the same thing, expecting different results, is that, you keep trying, you trot these lines out, and yeah, they've worked well together in the past, and as the games have gone on, they're just not producing. And history has shown that Larson has had these funks in the second half of the season. This one started maybe a little bit early, but to have this effort against a reeling Duluth team, and just not being able to produce and not taking the shots that are available to you, and making bad decisions and making terrible passes and not being on the same page. It's just, there's been no improvement from this team as the season gone on. And I feel like everybody else in the NCHC has been getting better, sans Miami.
Yeah, that's a good start. There's a lot to chew on there. Yeah, this was rough. This was an embarrassing weekend. And surprisingly, this was against Duluth, and my feelings about Duluth. Very little of this rant is going to be anything really about Duluth. I wasn't especially impressed by them. I don't think they're a particularly good team. That made this performance by the Huskies worse. But whatever. The Duluthness of this rant is just incidental. It really doesn't have anything to do with the major things that we took away from this weekend. Was that this team is as you said, it's almost like it's in free fall. And second halves of the season for the last 3 years prior to this one have all been bad. No above 500 second halves in the 3 years prior to this that we've rebooted the show, and especially bad road performances, like shockingly bad. Lots of uncompetitive scores in the last couple of years that we're talking about here. I suppose 2-0, which is basically a 1-0 game with an empty netter. You're not getting blown out of the water there, but it's the fourth time that you've been shut out this year. Third time in about a month and change. There was a 0-0 game in overtime. You lost 1-0 there. It's a game where you score 1 goal in regulation. You win that game. This game on Friday, you score 2 goals at the time that, obviously before Duluth scores their empty netter. You win that game without needing a bounty of offense. But there just seems to be very little punch and very little sense of urgency, which is a thing that I've been coming back to in the performances over the last 6 weeks or so that we've been a little unimpressed by. It just doesn't seem like there was enough creativity going on with this with the team in terms of line combinations. We're running out the same set of players to not good results. At some point, things need to change. And I'm with you in terms of I didn't think that they were going to make the tournament last week when I made that decision. The only reason I put them in the field was because I can't count to 15 or to 16, I should say. I came prepared with reasons why I didn't think St. Cloud was going to make the tournament. And this weekend, if my percentage of them making the tournament was hovering around 50% last week, it's closer to 25%. It took a big nosedive this week. Now, that's not to say that it's over. I mean, I still have the fact that you have 14 regular season games remaining. Certainly you're not mathematically eliminated, but from a emotional standpoint as a fan, this was it almost feels like the dagger, and we're not even in mid-January, which makes it different from even last year, which was a disappointing season. It was up until the February funk that you really kind of caved it in, and you still even had a chance when you made it to St. Paul. You still had a chance. I don't see this team sniffing St. Paul at this point. This team, if they're going to perform like they did this past weekend, 6th place, maybe at best. I mean, right now you're 1 point out from a tie for 7th, which is the same thing as saying that you're tied for 8th. 1 point ahead of both CC and Duluth at 6th place right now. To me, that seems like the best possible situation at this point. But there is still time. This team is, hockey is weird. You come out this next weekend against Arizona State, who's put themselves in good pairwise position. You sweep this Arizona State series coming up, we're probably back to where we were prior to the Duluth series, 10th in pairwise, probably roughly around there. It's certainly not over from that perspective, but it doesn't feel like it's really all that likely at this point. And I would like to see it. I just don't know what we need to do to get something changed. And that's the frustrating thing. I was angry on Friday. You're talking about the 5 stages. I was angry on Friday when I saw the Sahlquist. All the line pairings were the same. And I mentioned in that tweet, it was 4 games and they had 1 point combined. I forget about that St. Thomas game. So it was actually 5 games since they've been together. And now it's 7 games with just, again, 1 point combined through that line. And that was a major point of my frustration. Not only that, but the fact that Sahlquist line starts the game and functionally was the top line for you that game. They took the first draw of every period. And it's backwards. I don't understand the logic of relying on your bottom six to the extent that they have when they're not producing. And so anger was the emotion for me on Friday, because it's like we're seeing the same results here week in, week out, game in, game out. On Saturday, when I saw the only change was that a coin was listed as the extra skater and the Salquist line was intact and the Rosborough line was intact, that was a depression at that point, because I'm just like, what? I mean, the powers that be they're clearly not seeing the same game that I'm watching, and there's no sense of that anything is wrong to the extent that things need to be tinkered with. That depressed me. And that was the emotion through that Saturday game. I didn't expect them to win. When I saw that line chart, I'm like, there ain't any way that they're going to win this game. And we saw Enright show some cracks. I think he's about problem number 35 on a priority list. And the fact that we get to this point, 7 or 8 games into him taking the reins here, when he finally gets a not great performance. I mean, what expectations did we have of Gavin Enright coming into the season? I had none, that he was going to be a solid contributor. He's well beyond produced more positively for this team than I would have ever imagined. So I can't put it on him necessarily. Defense was sloppy, I thought, especially on Saturday with things like breakouts. We've been talking about these things the last couple of games recaps. They're just on both games, really. Friday, you held a kind of middling offense to 1 goal, essentially. But that's like the only positive I can take out of this weekend. And so that's where I'm at. I'm sort of, if we were to have done this show between Friday and Saturday, I probably would have been a little bit more red hot. At this point, I'm just sort of resigned. And the fact that we have the history of the 3 years prior to this where it only gets worse. Like we're talking winless Februaries for the last couple of years here. I don't. So now you're going to tell me that all of a sudden we're going to snap our fingers and find it here in the second half, especially when the schedule gets tough. You got North Dakota, you got at Western Michigan, you got at Denver, all coming up there in February. Do you think this team is going to go out to Denver and take a majority of the points? I can't see them going to Omaha in 2 weeks and even getting a split out of them. Like it's gotten me to the point where I'm pretty down and out about this team.
Yeah, it's just gotten to that point. And you were talking about the breakouts, and I just, my mind goes back to Saturday about, Ryman's bad touch pass that he tried to get out there, and that was intercepted, turned over, that led to a goal about, 20 seconds later. And then just, there were a couple of times that I saw that the defense got activated and started doing some cycling with it. And I was starting to get a little bit excited, but then it was just, they were trying some extra fancy passes. And it's like, this team needs to be more selfish. This team just needs to try to get the pucks on net, especially against a third string goalie, somebody, who just kind of thrown in there. And for some reason, we always end up having trouble against some of the goalies that make their single-digit starts against St. Cloud State. And I don't have any hope that we're all of a sudden a goal scorer is going to emerge. Especially if we keep tolling out the same lines, and we're just going to have the same expectations. And seeing a Huskies offense this bad and this lethargic out there, especially there on Saturday, it was just we were, to keep with the sea metaphors, we were just adrift. It felt lost out there. So I don't know. At this point, what would you like to see on Friday? You know, we're coming up against Arizona State, who's on a heater right now. Results in their last 8 games. You know, just dropped a tough overtime one, but you know, prior to that, I think was on like a 7-game winning streak. You know, and they swept Denver earlier in the year, but you know, I would just like to see a mix up of lines, something new, something fresh. I don't know what it is. I don't even have answers of who to pair with whom, but clearly what you're doing right now isn't working. And if we just dole out the same thing, it just feels like Larson is lost. And, you know, he's got to get, you know, I think some accountability has got to fall on him, because this is the way this season has gone and how everything has kind of transpired. I don't think it's acceptable.
Certainly not. I want to get back to your what would you do question.
I probably should have stopped. No wonder our podcasts go 2 hours long when I ask you a question and then I ramble on for another.
No, that's okay. I actually have
seconds.
I have some line
suggestions.
Okay. Maybe I'll give you some time right now if you want to do some back of the napkin chicken scratch. I've got some other analysis for this weekend first before I move on to that. I feel like I know that I dog on the Salquist line. One thing that I've noticed this weekend, one of those things that I learned, as you put it, I've been sleeping on the Rosborough line. Holy God, has that been a terrible line? Check out this.
They were absolutely abysmal, definitely on Friday or on Saturday. I mean, like they were atrocious on Saturday, and they've been pretty lackluster ever since then. But I'm really interested to hear what you got.
So just the bottom 6, which I know these lines haven't been intact all year, but I'm using these 6 players: Rosborough, Ashan, Ryman, Salquist, Thorson, and Ports, who all of these players have played a majority of the season. Rosborough's played every game. I mean, there's been, Ports has missed 2 games. There's been some, Ryman's missed 1. But for the most part, they've been on roster and appearing in games all season. These are current pointless streaks for some of these players. So these are games without any goals or assists, no points. Jack Ryman, 13. Thorson, 12. Nick Ports, 14. Ryan Rosborough, 19. He scored the very first game against St. Thomas. That tip in from the point,
that
his only point of the season. Other than that, talking about face-offs, that's what we hear about Salquist all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I had to search around for good face-off percentage statistics. I finally found College Hockey Inc. has a full, CHN, you can only look at their leaders, which is like the top 50, which is useless because it's usually just the guys that have taken 2 draws and are 100%. You don't really get a very good stat that you can search.
Yeah, but what's their chip?
Don't get started on that. But College Hockey Inc., you can look for face-off percentages for any player in college hockey. And so the good thing for St. Cloud is they've got 3 really good face-off guys. Gross right now is leading the team in face-off percentage at 58.5. Miettinen and Salquist are tied right there at 57.7. And Salquist, going back throughout his 4 years, has been right about 55% in each of his years, which would classify you as a face-off specialist. Now, it's not the best in the planet. Gross, who leads this group, is 18th nationwide in face-off percentage, but 55% is going to put you, top 25-ish in the country, which is good. That shows that you have at least one skill when it comes to Salquist. Ryan Rosborough, his face-off percentage, 37.9, which is 7th worst in the country when counting guys that have over 100 chances. And last year, his faceoff percentage was in the 40s. He hasn't shown himself to be a good, not even like an average faceoff guy. He's been a bad faceoff specialist in his time at St. Cloud State.
Specialist is used loosely there.
And he's got 9 points total in his entire career. And again, I said 1 point this year. Now, I got some interesting news, which might inform our upcoming segment about what would we do if we have any input. Alex Fern let me know that Rosberg apparently has stayed back in Duluth. He was injured late in the game on Saturday with a Kleber hit. So Alex Fern thinks
that was a big hit.
Alex Fern thinks he's not going to play this weekend. Now, we don't have any official word there, but
you're okay reporting that. You're okay to.
This is what he messaged me.
Okay.
So, whether or not that's true or not, my reaction was, at the very least, that might force some changes because you are going to have to find a fourth center.
Obviously, we wish him the best.
We wish him the best. But the sense of sometimes I don't know if Einstein came up with this one, but is it necessity is the mother of all invention? Sometimes you're forced into making changes where circumstances that don't force you into those might lead for you to remain complacent. And with Rodgers continuing to be injured, you've got 12 forwards to work with. Someone's got to slot into the center position. Again, if this is true and Rosberg is going to be unavailable, I would just look at those stats that I just showed you and say he can probably take a seat for a game or two, even if he is at full health. And again, that's the same with Ryman. He's been not producing, like literally 0 goals or points in the 13-game stretch. And since November started, which again, you had the 6-1 October, but since November, which is a span of 13 games, you've got 6 points total from that bottom 6. Sahlquist and Nishan have 3 points each from those bottom 6 players. That's just not cutting it. I don't care how good your top 2 lines are. If you've got contributions from your bottom 6 to that low of output, and the fact is the top 2 lines haven't been producing. Like, they haven't been compensating for the weaknesses of the bottom 2 lines. Thing you could say there is, well, the bottom 6 aren't going to get as much ice time as those top 6 players, which, if you look at the time on ice, does bear itself out. But I was curious on that Friday game, and I actually went back and watched the third period again because I'm a sadist. The thing that brought it to my attention, if you want to look, this is my Charlie Day. This is my Charlie Day circles and
Pepe Silva here, and Andrew pulled out the big yellow legal pad.
Yeah, with scribblings and numbers and general insanity is what I would classify this as. What brought it to my attention was not only the thing that Sahlquist's lines started each period, which again just strikes me as almost like Larson's almost trolling me in particular. But there was one point early in the third where there was an icing on Duluth, so an offensive zone face-off, and Gross's line took the draw, and then it was immediately iced by Duluth again. And then, so 11 seconds later, so it was an 11-second shift, another icing, another offensive zone face-off, and the Sahlquist line comes out. So it was an 11-second shift by the Gross line. And so that led me to believe, like, what do we, and I wanted to really kind of look just for the first opening. I wanted to find that. I just went through the entire period and I took notes on what the shifts were. This is an inexact science because sometimes there's one player that gets off, 2 players that get off before the other line mate. So this is very rough in its exactitude. But I think it is illustrative of some of the issues and the frustrations that I've been coming up with. For the most part, again, this is the third period on Friday. You come into the period down 1-0. That is the scenario that I'm setting up here. for the most part, they're going through the 4 lines mechanically. It's like a shift at the factory. Start with Sahlquist, then Rosborough's line, then Gross's line, then Mietnin's line. Sahlquist's line comes out for a 37-second shift. Then that's that Gross 11-second shift. And then he brings Sahlquist back. They had just gotten off the ice. He got to bring Sahlquist's line up again. Then he followed up with Rosborough's line. Rosborough's line in this third period, they take the longest shifts. There's a 60-second shift. There's a 79-second shift. Mostly because they're pinned in their defensive zone. They can't get off the ice because they're not really offensive players. A couple of the big things. So the first 5 minutes of the third period, the top line, Mietnin, Hall, and Brnovik, they have a 29-second shift in the first 5 minutes. That's how you come out in the third period down 1 goal on the road, by double shifting your bottom 6 guys and playing your top line 29 seconds. This goes on. There's a couple of deviations, but minor deviations. Another thing is, so Sahlquist, he's the guy that takes every draw out of a big break. One thing about Larson, who I don't think is very good at this, he doesn't take advantage of stoppages and timeouts. He just keeps on the same shift. So if the third line was out, there was a stoppage, a TV timeout, for instance, well, the fourth line is going to come out next. Or in this case, it might just be the strategy is Sahlquist takes those draws, because he takes the opening draw and both of the faceoffs coming off of TV timeouts. Which again, I don't think is maximizing your best players. We see this like the Big Ten in the tournament a couple years ago. They normally don't play. They only play in their Big Ten schedule. They're playing with 1 TV timeout. Mm-hmm. And when they get to tournament time, there's all these extra TV timeouts for the ESPN games. They took advantage of that by saying, okay, well, we're going to get a free timeout essentially. So we're going to use that opportunity to give our top 2 lines more ice time, which makes sense. That doesn't seem to be a tool in Larson's bag, so to speak. The big deviation comes when there's an empty net situation. That's kind of when there is a sense of urgency put into place. And that line, there's 6 players that are out. It's interesting. He goes with Gross. It's kind of a mishmash of all the lines. Gross, Hall, Brnovik, Ashan at first. He gets hurt, if you remember. And he's replaced by Thorson coming off of that, which I thought was interesting. And then he's got Litke as his only true defenseman. Then Ingram's also on there as the 6th guy who's sort of playing a quasi point high slot position. As far as like a six sum of players for your extra attacker situation, I don't mind that. But they didn't see after that long whistle, because there was that big long review after Ashan, his helmet comes off. A pretty scary situation. His head appeared to hit the ice without the helmet on.
I thought that at first, but then I was like, maybe his hand got in the way as well to cushion it. So maybe it wasn't as bad upon further review. But originally, I gasped.
And that was actually a big play, because that forced a whistle and a long stoppage, like I said, because they reviewed it for major. But at that time, when he went down, Brnovik had the puck behind the net and he was circling the net. And then they blew the whistle because Ashan was hurt. And then they take the face-off out of the zone, which I thought was, I didn't really know. I guess it's because Ashan was hurt. Then you've got to blame the team that caused the stoppage. You take it out of the zone. That was they had a decent sequence there with the extra attacker. But then after that face-off comes out of the zone, I don't know if they really even got any additional offensive zone time. Then Duluth scores the empty net, and then they wave it off because it was offsides, and they actually score it for good. And then Rosborough's line finishes up in garbage time. I counted up all of the line ice time. Again, this is just for the third period, and it gets wonky because of that extra attacker situation. But so just to the time when it was 1 minute and 53 seconds to go in the game, to that point, here's time on ice. Rosborough's line, 5 minutes and 32 seconds. Sahlquist's line, 4 minutes and 45 seconds. Mietnin's line, 4 minutes and 13 seconds. And Gross's line, 4 minutes and 4 seconds. Now, again, you can add those certain players from the Gross and Miettinen line with the additional minute 26 that they all got as the extra attackers. So it's all somewhat close to 5 minutes. But Rosborough's line got the most ice time in the third period by my count, which is just like, what are we doing here? And I hope that this is way too over detailed because this game drove me nuts, and Saturday wasn't any better. Did you get some time to shuffle up some lines? Or do you have any input on what? I just babbled there for long?
Just so enthusiastic, just knock it over the mic. Like, obviously I don't see him in practice. I don't know a lot of what. I just want something different. And the main thing that I look at, and maybe it's unfair for me to put too much onto a freshman, but with the expectations coming in, I'm looking at Thorson and I'm like, you gotta get him a way to jumpstart him or to show any type of scoring prowess that he had in high school and in junior. Because he has had that ability in the past and just to essentially lose it. And I think being on, Saltquist's line doesn't help you in the slightest. So I would just like to move some things around and maybe, get him with him yet, and move him around. Just anything that's different. I'd like to try it out at this point. And maybe you can find some kind of lightning like you had last year when you had Ingram and Gross together. So that's, my big thing is the two people I feel like you need to get going for scoring goals is Thorson and Ingram. And it just any way you can do it and shift your centers around them and their play styles, I think is a start. And at least you got to try something a little bit different.
So would you go off of Ingram, Gross, and a coin?
Yeah. At this point, yeah. I mean,
that's not what they were playing this weekend, but they clicked a little bit last year. And then this year they've only had a couple of games, but that Omaha game where Ingram finally got off the schneid, that was the threesome that was on that line. But yeah, it's like, which is, if there's any lines that we saw this weekend, is there any that you would keep intact?
I mean, we could.
Or are you willing to just throw it in a blender?
Yeah, I'm kind of willing to throw it in a blender.
Because that's kind of where I'm at. Why not?
Yeah, like at this point, what do you have to lose? Because, your ability to score goals is just not existent. And I feel like it's, I'd have to double check on the stats and how long it's like in our history, but it feels like it's been a long time since we've had an offense that's been this inept.
The first couple of Motzko years, probably, or maybe like the last Dull year.
Oh, I was thinking, what was it? What was the Larson year that missed the tournament? That wasn't 16, 17?
1920.
1920.
Technically, there wasn't a tournament that year. Don't tell Arizona State that. But
2020, you mean?
Yeah, 2019, 2020.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Sorry. We're not going all the way back to the Harding days, but 2019, 2020.
And what was our, like I should look back to see what like our goals per game were for that.
I mean, that was the Wave of Babies year, like Ashan or Akabi and Cranola were all that was their first year. That's sort of the inverse of the Larson years that we've seen in the last couple of years, where they had a really bad first half, decent second half, then it tailed off. That was another one of the years where you just got your ass kicked by Duluth up in Duluth. That would have been the last series that they played that year. And it was just a blowout in both of those games. But prior to that, I think they beat and tied North Dakota at home, and North Dakota's very good that year. Split against Denver. Like, they made a run in February-ish, which is, again, not how it's happened in the last couple of years. But their first half, that was when they got swept by CC at home. CC was terrible that year. They couldn't beat Princeton, who was god-awful that year. Your first month or two was the bottomed out, and then it sort of slightly improved after that. But I would assume that they had better scoring that year. I mean, you're like bottom 10 close to that at this point in goals per game with this group.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
right now we're sitting at 2.2 goals per game. And even in
what that puts you nationwide,
and
tied for 52nd. So.
And that 2019-2020 season, we were at 2.7. So,
which is,
I mean,
not great, but it's better than what you are this year.
So, I mean, and I'm just, obviously I'm just going through some of these years, and it's just,
I'm sure that's got to be the worst. Yeah, I'm even looking at some of these early Motzko years. You're putting up over 3 goals a game there, and that was not a great offensive era, relatively speaking, kind of the trap years. It doesn't go back to 04-05, at least CHN's page that I'm looking at right now, but I bet you that was worse than even this year, because that was, I think, the year that Ionaza led the team with like 28 points. Like, they couldn't score at all that year. But that's my hunch. I don't have stats to back that up.
Yeah. So, I mean, we are the worst. I mean, it's been the worst, at least in, history that I've been a fan of, just ineptitude when it comes to the offensive zone.
Yeah, it's been bad.
And at this point, it's like, try something. And I also, message for Adolski, maybe a little bit of a spoiler, for the women's as well. But clearly what you're doing isn't working. You're talking about not willing to change a line, that's even worse. And, to have not score a goal on the weekend, but, I'll get to that in a second. But it's, kind of where we're at. I think they've got the talent, but it feels like just the spark isn't there. And it's just, this team just seems disinterested and not on the same page. And it's just incredibly frustrating.
It's weird too that we're talking about these lines being basically unchanged since December started, roughly. That wasn't the case in October. I remember there being quite a lot of shuffling. Remember, Hall was playing on the 4th line with Salquist, I think, in the Michigan series. Remember taking note of that. There seemed to be more willingness to try guys with different players in the early part of the season. But then it seemed like once the conference schedule started, like, he's using October as some sort of testing ground, and then he's going to pick his best lines and then run with those with no variation from that time, which is frustrating. It's not something that I think winning teams tend to do when things are when you're struggling to the extent that St. Cloud has been. I'll ask you this: if we're going to think that Rosborough is not going to be available, who would you move to center? Because you've got to have 4 centers. You've got candidates, guys like Ingram have some center experience. Hall was a center in most of his junior days. Ryman's had experience at that position. What are you doing with that 4th center this coming weekend? Do you have any ideas there?
I would put Ryman there, would be my gut check. We saw Ingram there at center, and I think the last thing we want
I don't think for a guy that's been struggling so much, putting another big assignment on him, I think could completely scramble him even more to the extent that he already has. I would try Hall there for, like, why not? Like, this is my back of the napkin scribblings. Try these out for size. Gross with Thorson and Gardner. Mietinen with Ingram and Acoin. Hall with Bernovic and Ryman. Salquist with Ashan and Zinger. I did that, which I'm sure is not even a flicker in Larson's eye. But I'm looking for some way to get Ports out of this lineup.
I did see him up on the rush a couple of times.
He had a quasi breakaway. And I wouldn't mind it. It was interesting. Him and Bufflin were on a power play. He's like the number 2 unit, because we should mention Cooper Wiley was out of action for this last weekend, which it's not like I've been raving about Wiley, but he is a first pairing defenseman. It's never a good sign to have a guy like that hurt. He might not be available this weekend either. So needed to be, again, more of that necessity, forcing the hand. You needed to tinker with your defense this past weekend, and Bufflin was maybe the beneficiary of that. And that injury might preclude any sort of possibility, which probably is nil anyway, of moving Zinger up. I still think it would be a good idea. And again, this is one of those things. At this point, why not try? Yeah. And if that's going to mean that Caleb Tyson is going to need to suit up, I'm not here to tell you that Caleb Tyson is an all-world player, but is he going to be any worse defensively than Josh Zinger? I really don't think so. And you have a possibility of injecting some offense with Zinger up front. I might be totally on an island when it comes to that idea, but I think it's worth it. I'm not even there's a lot of shuffling that you can do. I'm just using these 4 lines that I threw out there as just a start. Just do something. I even don't like, I'm trying to keep some pairings together. Like, I like Hall and Brnovik. I like those guys together. The reason I'm putting Thorson with Gross and Gardner, but mostly with Gross, is because the 2 points that Thorson has this year came with when he was playing with Gross. And that might be something that you can try to use to develop Thorson. That's the big development failure from this year so far.
Yeah.
I mean, there's guys like Rosborough and Ryman, the secondary guys like a Coyne and Ports and Rogers. We're not really looking at those guys as being top end talent. Thorson, of the guys that we've been mentioning, is the one guy out of that group of struggling players that you really feel like is someone that can be a key piece in the future. And the fact that you've put him on this line, which is proving it's almost like it's stunting his growth. Yeah. And that I don't like. That's concerning. His junior production, he was a very good junior player, a prolific scorer at juniors. He does not look like a guy who is a prolific scorer at any level at this point. And that's the guy that I feel bad for the most out of all the younger players on this team. And I just hope that we haven't wrecked him. I looked too at Brnovik on Friday. He looked better on Saturday, but on Friday, I think he had a bit of World Juniors-itis in him, in that he was still sort of in the role that he was at World Juniors, which was, I can't be the guy to shoot. I'm supposed to just dish it off to all the other better guys around me, and I can't be assertive and make a play myself. And it seems like he got out of that funk scoring on Saturday. But the Brnovik performance on Friday was troubling as well, because you're not going to win many games when your sniper is passing up, literally passing off grade A scoring chances, and taking the puck off of his stick in shoot first opportunities. Hopefully that's just a blip and that he's gotten those kinks out of his system. But that was not good to see either. Yeah, it's frustrating. And now I see some chatter. I see the dreaded R word coming out. Oh, this is just a rebuilding year. And of all like sports talking points, that one might be my least favorite, especially from a college sports and current college sports perspective. You don't have the runway here. I think rebuild should be used in very limited situations, like literally rebuilding your program from dormancy, like what Robert Morris did. Robert Morris was cut as a program for, was it 2 years? At least 1 year. I think it was 2 years. Yeah. When you restarted that program and you had an entire roster to build, that is a rebuild, or what Anchorage had to do as well. to a lesser extent, all the programs that took the COVID year off. That was different because you didn't lose the entire roster. But still, there is a stoppage and a start of a program. That's a thing when you can say a rebuild. In the Wild West that we're in now, where transfer portal and everything, you can't just say, well, we've got 4 years here with guys like Thorson and Bernovic. Like, you blink and Bernovic could be gone after the end of this year. Transfer portal keeps.
I can see Thorson being ticked off that he's on a line with Solquist and transfer portal out and has a heck of a next year at a Big Ten school.
Or CCHA school is going to give him first line minutes with the other two best scorers that they have on their team. It's not just the rich plucking guys off from St. Cloud. Look at the one this past summer. I'm not saying that this like made or broke your season, but the informal trade we made with Northern Michigan, giving them Ewert, we getting Zinger. Northern Michigan seems to be having the better end of that deal. In retrospect, we could second guess all day long here that Larson probably should have been more active in the transfer portal this year, based on those bottom 6 guys that I'm talking about, with some openings there. Transfer portal's been very hit or miss, and seems from Larson's perspective that the hits were all compacted into one season, which was the Crookshank, the good Bassey year, and then Anhorn. The other moves that he's made in the transfer portal have been of varying success and probably mostly some failures. You've got guys like Jared Cockrell, Seamus Donahue had some high moments, but at least in the last 2 years, it's been more miss than hit. But as far as a rebuild goes, that wasn't the narrative coming into the season. They were picked fourth,
not at all,
by the media, and the fourth in the NCHC, this is a conference. Last year, 5th place Omaha and 6th place Western both made the tournament out of those spots. So, and the media gets things wrong all the time. We make a running gag about the joke that USCHO is. So that's not everything. But this was not billed as a rebuilding year for St. Cloud. And it seems like we only hear that when things start to go bad. And then certain fans like to say, well, it's just a rebuilding year. It's an excuse, convenient hand waving away of bad play. And the fact is, you can't, you don't have the luxury of saying we've got guys here for this amount of years, and that, yes, this year we might be punting on this year, but look out for next year or the year after. Because again, the roster is going to change more than you think between now and whatever the time that you think the window really is. You can't rebuild. You got to reload. And
you've got the tools to reload.
Right. I just, at this point for this season, I don't think you should punt yet. That this is a weird spot that they're in, because I can see Larson saying, well, give it until the end of the month here before I really blow things up, doing the things that we're trying to, spinning the lines in a blender. Let's just see if we can, if we can take a majority of the points against Arizona State this weekend, we can go down to Omaha and have a good weekend. Then we can right the ship and we're back, baby. Or do you make that move now and say, F it, this might work, it might not, but what we're doing right now is not working. I'm just losing confidence that Larson's a capable coach of making changes like that, especially big wholesale changes, without having his hand forced. Because again, the last 3 years, we've seen these extended streaks in the second half where we're seeing the same issues. I remember it was a couple years ago, the penalty kill was terrible. Was it last year that the power play ran dry for like a month? It's the same kinds of issues that keep popping up. And I'd like to think that we have the personnel, both on the coaching staff, brain trust, as well as the roster here, that we can make those adjustments. But it seems like it's getting worse before it's getting better. That's my concern.
No. I went back to my old my old love, collegehockeystats.net, and other than the fact that I miss it dearly and I would do pretty much anything to get it back online. 2.73, that was the 0405 season.
So even a half goal better than
Yeah,
what this
even a half goal
than
better.
what this team is currently producing.
Dave
That's not
Iannazzo,
good.
16 goals, 16 assists, 32 points.
And that was the leading scorer.
That was the leading scorer.
I mean, you're on pace to. I mean, I guess Bernovik's at 17 points right now. I mean, you come close to that. Like he's on pace to break 30, but not much more than that.
And that's where it's just something needs to happen. Something needs to change, and I'm all for anything and everything coming when I see the lineup sheet for Friday.
Yeah, he's on pace for if we're playing 36 games, which would be the regular season, then 2 playoff games, he'd be on pace for 31.1 points. And then Hall's right there at 16. I mean, you got 4 guys right now in the double digits. I mean, Grantasean, Litke, and Gardner are tied for 5th with 6 points on the season. That's pathetic. So, and again, of course, it's the one year where we just have aces goaltending.
Yeah.
And we can't line that up with even an average offense. If this was even in that 2.7 goals per game, you've probably upped your win total by 2 or 3, just in those shutout losses that I mentioned earlier. Like just having 1 or 2 goals here or there puts you to a point where we are not screaming the sky is falling. That's going to be the difference at this point in the season. At point of the narrative they're at right now, it seems like this is a year where the offense is the culprit. And just in general, in all sports that I follow, which is basically baseball and hockey at this point, I always prefer, if it's going to be one or the other, give me a good offense and bad defense, because at least that's more interesting. I think the biggest, like the strongest curse word you can say about a hockey team is that they're boring. And this is a boring hockey team to watch right now.
Yeah, it is. So, as we switch over then to Arizona State, who I said a little bit earlier, is kind of on a heater right now. And it's lost 4-3 in overtime to North Dakota. But, that game, I believe Arizona State had it, and Cameron Berg coming back, like I said, him back to line up for North Dakota is quite the jump for them. Ended up tying it, and then
about 30 seconds to go. I mean, so Arizona State is 30 seconds away from a sweep of that series.
So, Powers is definitely rated the ship there in down in Arizona for the Sun Devils, and I'm historically we've done really well against them, but the way these teams are going right now, I would be absolutely shocked if we get a win this weekend.
I think they're gonna get a game. It's just how hockey works. I think they're gonna at least get a win this weekend. It might even be more than that. I like Arizona State too. I picked them to be the field to make the field last show, and this weekend it would have very much solidified it if they would have completed the sweep. But even with the win plus, as we like to put it, I think that's a pretty good result for them. And I think they are a good team, a better team than I was giving them credit for coming into the season.
Same here.
And it's mainly because their big question mark, I think, was goaltending, and they've gotten very good goaltending from both Gibson Homer and Luke Pavicic. Both got a game this past weekend. Collectively, they're putting together a .914 save percentage as a team. That includes like empty netters too. So like Homer is putting up a .932 save himself in 8 games. Pavicic is 12. But the goaltending's held up, and they're getting depth scoring, and this past weekend was the first action for Cruz Lucius, who was their probably biggest name that they got in the transfer portal from Wisconsin. And he put up a point in each of these games against North Dakota. He might be their best player. And the fact that they've already got a couple of guys at 20 points. I mean, they got 5 guys at 16, whereas St. Cloud has 2 of those guys with at least 16 points. Noah Beck from the point has put up 20 points, a transfer from Clarkson. They're very active in the transfer portal. So Bennett Shimmick was a Providence transfer. He's put up a very good season, 20 points for them. Ryan Kerwin from Penn State. Artem Schlein from Northern Michigan. I mean, we're talking about Larson maybe swinging and missing, and who knows how much he actually made efforts at transfer portal guys. The results, at least for Arizona State, have been very positive this year. Keep an eye too on Cullen Potter, just turned 18 this weekend. So he started the season as a 17-year-old with Arizona State, and Cullen as well. You got to love the Gen Z names, but he's a guy that is going to be drafted this summer. Could go as high as the first round, but he's maybe their highest end prospect that they've had as a program to date. And so very young, obviously, but and so he's going to be raw, but he's a guy to at least look at this coming weekend, because it's first time St. Cloud will see him as well as all these other Sun Devils. But just in the future, he's a guy that they can rely on perhaps next year to have a breakout season. But so they've defended decent. They've goaltended above their expectations, and they're putting the puck in the net to a good extent. And I think they're a solid team. Something about it, something tells me that the Huskies on Friday are going to have a surprise. Like they're going to win 4-1 or something like that. And we're going to come back next week and be like, hey, is it all solved? We'll see. I'm not ready to say that, but I came into this past weekend, the Duluth series, we had a question about, is this a must sweep series for the Huskies? And I said, well, you at least got to take one game. I don't think it's a must sweep. And sure enough, they got swept. But I did do the customizer. If they would have won one game to split the series, they would be at 12, which is basically where they were to start the weekend. So it does validate the point that my hunch that the split wouldn't have killed you. The sweep might end up killing you. Although I have a hunch that it's not going to be just that sweep that's going to kill you. This might have been, this is the first time all year, at least since, correct me if I'm wrong, you've been tracking the pairwise where you've got like an Excel sheet, I think. Is this the first time since you've been tracking this year that they've been outside the pairwise? Because they're at 17 right now. I think that's the case.
Check. I believe so.
I think when Posh went down, they were 7th, and they were hanging around 7th for a while, and then started to dip. And I think this is the first time that they've actually been outside. Cut line would actually be 13 right now, because Minnesota State dropped out this past weekend. So there'd be actually 3 auto bids. 3 conferences don't have any teams currently in a pairwise at-large position. But certainly even the top 16, whatever the cut line you want, 15, 16, they're outside of that at this point.
Yep. So you mean since I've been tracking it? You mean
since you've been tracking it this year?
This is the
first time.
Because I was going back to when I've been tracking it.
No.
Yeah, because the only time has actually been at the end of the season last year. Depending on where the cut line is, because I think we were 14 going into the final couple of games, where St. Cloud ended up dropping to 16 and thus out of the NCAA tournament. But yeah, as of this year, the lowest that I've been, and I track it on Sunday nights, was 11 in December, and now dropping to 17. So needless to say, they're our sinker for this week. And our floater is actually UConn, going up 5 spots. But
beating New Hampshire, sweeping them. But New Hampshire because I guess UConn is now at 11, New Hampshire only dropped to 13th, which is still, like I said, the cut line is at 13 right now. So 7 teams in Hockey East.
Yep. So,
which is nuts.
Quickly, as we go back, as painful as this last weekend is, I forgot to ask if you've got a POW. I agree. Like, I ragged on you a couple seasons ago about not having a POW. Like, there's got to be one player of some type of importance that did something right. Go Huskies woo said end right for Friday's game alone. And I don't have a better answer. I can't look at anybody up and down that lineup to say, yeah, they had a solid weekend. I mean, I guess Gardner had a goal. I mean, I guess that was all right.
And Gross had 2 points on Saturday. Guess you could go with him. I mean, I don't remember yelling at Reiners, but I might have missed something. I should say, like, I don't know if it was the same for you, but holy God, the NCHC.TV stream was crapping out on Saturday. Like the last half of the game, it kept doing like a lag, or it's like pause,
yeah,
and then it would resume, which it got all out of sync with my KVSC syncing the feed. So I actually had to listen. It was only like 10 minutes of game time that I had to listen to those Duluth announcers. My God, are they bad? They were like, they kept complaining about calls at the end of the game. It's like, was it six out of the first 7 penalties were called on St. Cloud on Saturday? It's like, you guys got the benefit of the doubt of the officiating on that game, but yet up by 3 in garbage time, you've still got to be complaining about refs. So yeah, that was only by force did I have to endure the Duluth announcers, but bad stream. So I was going in and out. Like, I missed the 5th goal live. Like, I looked at like the Arizona State game, that feed was fine. So led me to believe it was something to do with Duluth's feed, which of course,
yeah. I watched the first half of the first game on NCHC, and I sent out a message to everybody being like, hey, how's everyone's stream? You know, mine's really crappy.
Yeah, I had no problems on Friday.
And then somebody was like, yeah, Fox 9 is, I mean, it's not great. It's not like incredibly high def, but like everything's fine. And then I was like, oh, you know, if it's an away game, my mind goes to, I have to watch it on NCHC. I didn't even think that was on Fox 9 Plus, which it was.
No, sure.
So then I switched over to YouTube TV, and I was fine watching Fox 9 Plus the rest of the time. But I was having issues when I did watch it for that amount of time.
I was on NCHC TV both games, and Friday was fine, but Saturday, both the second half, or really the third period of the Saturday game, is when I started having issues. Which at that point, again, it was probably for the best that I wasn't seeing all that. True.
So, all right. Anything else out of conference you want to talk about quickly before you go to the women?
I mean, CC keeps free falling. We're talking about St. Cloud free falling.
I mean, that's.
But
I do wonder where they're going to be ranked in the SCHO poll.
Actually, that's a good point.
As they're sitting in the mid 30s right now for pairwise.
I guess I could look, but
33. No, that's
34. I've got
34. Yeah.
Duluth up to 33. Wow,
Duluth's up
good
to
jump for them.
Yep. So,
yeah, some more frustrations, and then Omaha being on the winning end of that sweep. That's who St. Cloud has next week, and playing in Omaha's. It's kind of been another house of horrors for St. Cloud of late. So
it's the benches on opposite sides. I tell you, it's a house of horrors for me watching a game, seeing benches on the opposite sides. Only second to seeing benches on the near side in a couple of arenas now that in the NCHC that annoys me, but that's for a different week.
Yeah, we got a 3-way tie for first place in the conference right now. Western Michigan, though, played 2 fewer games. That's the weird thing that we're going to have to get used to just for these 2 years here. It's a 9-team league where there's going to be a disparity of games played because, you can't, not all 9 teams can't play every weekend. Someone's got to be off. So Western, if they're in the CCHA and doing by winning percentage, Western would be first. But right now tied with 19 points with Western, Arizona State, and North Dakota. So this weekend and coming up, we got Western at North Dakota, which should be a good series. And so, yeah, it should be a competitive. Denver took care of business against Miami, who Miami still hasn't won a league game, over 10 now this year. So the race for the Penrose should be a thrilling one. It's probably not going to involve St. Cloud, though.
No, for us onlookers. Sounds like it's someone will make the meme of SpongeBob and Patrick and whatever looking out the window at everybody else celebrating outside.
I put it at the beginning of the show. I mean, you've staked your claim that NCAAs aren't in St. Cloud's future.
Correct.
What about top half of the league standings?
No.
They going to be on the road for the playoffs?
Who are we better than right now?
Yeah.
I honestly, I even have trouble saying, you're talking about CC in a free fall. Yeah. At this point, I can see 8th.
I mean, right now, Duluth is tied for 7th / tied for 8th, and you're 0-2 against them.
And you're talking about how you don't think Duluth's very good, and I agree with you, but them having the plants back together, I thought I see more future from them than I've seen with the future for the Huskies, which I don't love saying. But it's...
I mean, that's how they were billed this year. I mean, they had the number 1 recruiting class coming into the season. But goaltending is probably, that Clayton Knapp, that's another, I mentioned this on Twitter, the 4 shutouts. You got Clayton Knapp, Logan Stein from Michigan, and TJ Septenfelter from North Dakota, Mbarico being the other one. But the other 3 other than Mbarico came into those games at sub 900 save percentages. Yeah. It's not like we're getting shut out here by Marty Brodeur in his prime. And I think you're going to look back on this year with a Clayton Knapp shutout, and you're going to be like, huh? Did you see too? I think I mentioned it in the recap. First shutout for Duluth over St. Cloud since '93, which is incredible. 134 games in between shutouts. St. Cloud has shut out Duluth 11 times in that same stretch. And you'd think that one of these rabbit-foot goalies that they kept plucking out of the NAHL, like Shepard or Miska or Kaskasuo or any of these guys, would have turned in a shutout at some point over the last 30 plus years. But no, you had to go back to the days of Brett Larson manning the blue line for Duluth. That's the last time that Duluth had shut out the Huskies prior to this weekend on the men's side. But here's this for a segue. We do not have to go that far back for a Duluth shutout.
So
St. Cloud on the women's
spoiler alert, there are not a lot of goals here this weekend to talk about on the women's side. So let's hit the recap.
St. Cloud State women looking to score their first goal in Duluth since February 2023. Would they break the dry spell? Friday's opener sees both teams feeling each other out, and a scoreless duel ensues. Through the first half of the game, Duluth controls most of the action, but Amelia Carrico and Ave Gascon match each other save for save. Olivia Mobley breaks the drought with 5 minutes to go in the second period, her 3rd goal of the season against St. Cloud, thereby certifying her as a Husky killer. Bulldogs would get some good fortune with under 6 seconds left in the second, when Ida Carlson's shot from the point pinballs its way off multiple Huskies and squirts past Carrico to make the lead 2-0 going into the third. Olivia Walleen would add an empty netter with under 2 minutes left in the third period to make it 3-0. The Huskies appear to break their Duluth drought when Avery Myers bangs a puck past Gascon with just over a minute left, but it's overturned after a coach's challenge video review, claiming Myers knocked the puck in with a throwing motion of her arm. To add greater insult to injury, Emma Gentry's rebound goal with 2 seconds left is also challenged by Duluth and also overturned, this time due to goalie interference. The final goes down as 3-0, and now it's 5 straight games for St. Cloud and Duluth without a goal. Saturday's game would see much of the same storyline. The game remained scoreless through the first, most of the second, when again Duluth would break through the late goal in the second period, this time by Zoe Kroc, scoring just her second goal of the year. Olivia Mobley strikes again in the third period, getting not one but 2 goals past Sonia Hola. 5 of Mobley's 12 goals on the season have come at the hands of the Huskies. Huskies get 4 power play chances but only outshoot Duluth in 1 period out of 6 on the weekend, and incredibly, Gascon and company notched their 6th straight shutout of the Huskies at Amsoil, 3-0.
And it was another weekend at Amsoil for the women, where they ended up getting shut out. And to insert the Adulski clip here, we got a score, and it's becoming a broken record. And there was even a few chances that I looked at. I mean, Sorial had 1-2 point blank in front of the net. And Garcon just down and out of it and just airmails it wide, like just high and wide even. And it was just like, I want to know what type of shooting drills that is going on during practice. And I'm talking just like, because obviously these women can fire the puck, but they are definitely not on target and they're definitely not shooting to score. And, Duluth is a heck of a defensive team, and they've done it to a lot of teams in the past, but this is an incredibly bad just showing in general on the offensive score sheet here for the last few weeks, and it's been incredibly tough to watch.
It certainly has. There's only so much I can really add at this point. Like you mentioned about Adulski, I mean, he's shown some willingness to tinker with lines. Like the start of the season, we were liking the Sunderland, Henderson, that sort of, that line, but he ended up kind of tinkering with those. The bottom 6 has been tinkered with. We've got Promisberger sort of moving. Parent and Farrell have had some high points. It's not enough. The fourth line's really done nothing all year, no matter who's on that line. And Avery Myers being robbed of a goal. What did you think about that call, by the way?
I mean, my thoughts on that.
Again, that's just like a trolling thing at this point. Like you cannot score in this building.
Yeah,
and
it's like they're making a point of it at that. Yeah, right. Exactly. It's, I don't know. It was pretty garbage in my opinion.
I mean, I guess I didn't know that in the rule book because she didn't bat it in with her hand. If anything, it was off her shoulder.
Yeah,
but I guess I didn't know that was against the rules. I mean, it somewhat makes sense, but it's one of those things that I just don't really. It feels like it's one of those you're straining a muscle in order to disallow goals. And of course, we're talking at this point the difference between it being 3-1 or 3-0. Yeah. I think for the team though, you saw after that goal and then the Gentry non-goal as well. Mm-hmm. The team was excited. I think not just that they thought that they were going to win the game, obviously, but that it was a monkey off their back. And from a psychological standpoint, it would have maybe helped just a skosh going into the Saturday game for them to get the streak off of their minds. But yet it almost made it worse that they had to do it not once, but twice. They sort of had another just kick in the midsection in the last minute of the game, which I'm sure did not sit well with the team. So it just, it's not only frustrating from the perspective of this is just a team, and especially against Duluth, that is just it's like a parasite at this point. You just hate playing them. And with recent history, no wins there. I mean, we mentioned the 6-game now shutout streak. But it's been February 2019 was the last win that this team has had gotten up in Duluth. In the Adolski era, 10 games, just 2 goals scored across those 10 games. Taylor Lind, she scored the last goal up in Duluth. That should tell you something because she's not on the team anymore. And then Emma Gentry was the only other goal scored in Duluth since the new regime took over. It's too long. And it's just, I don't know what to do at this point. I feel like this offense is in an even worse position than the men's side is. And rewind it a little bit if you want to hear some desperation about our takes on the men's side. It's, I don't know, going forward, like this is another one where Mankato got swept at Wisconsin this past weekend, which is no surprise. But I'm feeling it's going to come down to their head-to-head matchup against Mankato coming up to dictate whether or not they're going to who's going to get fifth. And seeing Mankato's performance against the Huskies earlier this year, but also just in other games, like they're a team that certainly not a great team, not even a good team maybe, but they're a team that can at least score to an extent that St. Cloud can't. Like at this point, I'm thinking 6th place is where this team is going to end up. We can cross that bridge when we get to it. We've got Bemidji coming up next, but it just there's the shuffling of lines that we talked about with the men's side. You can certainly do the same on the women's side. I just feel even less confident about the bottom 6 for the women's team, that we can have any sort of offense coming from that. And special teams has been bad as well. I don't know. I mean, similar to what I was saying about the men's team, where you have good goaltending, you pretty much got a very good defensive core as well. You feel like these efforts are being wasted by not just a lack of offense, but a complete absence of offense. And just getting a goal or two here or there would just go a very long way for this team's overall success. It's just, I don't know. We've been banging our heads against our wall here for the last couple of years, trying to get just a minimal amount of offense coming out of this team. Because even these games, I mean, they were scoreless through more than half the game on both Friday and Saturday. Feeling that you get the first goal in either of these games plays out a lot differently. But again, we don't get good things as St. Cloud State fans.
No. Looking at the scores by period, -3 in the first period, +3 in the second period, -9 in the third. And I go back to that second game against Duluth here at the NCHC, or at the
NHC.
Herb. Yeah, NHC. And just having that Duluth collapse in my head as well. But it's, going down, looking at the shot percentage. I mean, of the people who are taking the shots as well. Soriel, who I said is, one of your best playmakers, sitting at 6.7 shot percentage. But, you look at Gentry, 5.5. And it's like, that's the horse that you're supposed to have there to really, someone that your team is supposed to really rally on and rally behind. And she is your best, especially internationally acclaimed player. And to try to get some type of a spark there, sitting at 5 goals and 2 assists on the season. 91 shots, so she's not afraid to shoot it, but the placement there is just she's just not getting it done. And that's where I like to go back and say, what kind of drills is going on that we're just so inept when it comes to putting the puck in the net. As far as the defense goes, I thought they were solid, but Olivia Mobley, I thought, had just a heck of a series for them. And I kind of overlooked her, to be honest, when you're talking about, Van Wieren or O'Brien. I'm sorry, is it O'Brien?
She's on the team. I wouldn't call her one of their star players, but a quality player.
I'm sorry, Wallen, I was going to say. Mobley is, and Caitlin Kramer as well. who, as a freshman, coming out with 10 goals. I'm just like to see somebody step up for that, and just another weekend of getting not only getting swept but no goals scored. Obviously, a little bit different than the Wisconsin series earlier this year. I mean, especially we were in those games here against Minnesota Duluth. I thought, but it's just that Minnesota Duluth has that extra edge, that extra little jump to them, and they know that they're going to end up winning. Where they're able to mentally put themselves up, and they've got the people that are able to put the puck in the net and get behind them. And just St. Cloud State's lacking that, and it's just frustrating to watch.
Yeah, it certainly is.
I think they have the talent. I think they do, and I think it's a little bit different issue than the men, but it still kind of goes back to we're in probably the biggest scoring drought in total Huskies history when it comes to it. And it's just I'd like to see some kind of changes and improvement when we go to when we have the Bemidji series, and that's a series where you got to get points. You can't drop any points, and Bemidji can kind of snake bite you.
Well, I certainly hope that that's not going to be the case. I mean, Bemidji, for all we're talking about St. Cloud's struggles, Bemidji is in a different league when it comes to, well, not literally a different league, but you get what I'm saying. They were also shut out for the weekend at Ohio State, losing 6-rip and 4-rip. Those two shutouts were their 9th and 10th time being shut out this year. Now, St. Cloud's offense is like the men. We mentioned men are bottom 15 in offense. St. Cloud's 10th worst. Bemidji State is one spot worse. They're number 9. Worst offense with 1.7 goals per game on the season. I mean, I was a little surprised a couple of weeks ago when they played Penn State and Brown and put up 9 goals combined on that weekend, especially against Penn State. But that seems more like a blip than anything. And St. Cloud, when they went up to Bemidji earlier this year in October, were a team that shut them out both games. Again, that's happened multiple times this season. 3 times Bemidji has been shut out for an entire weekend this season, all in conference play, also against Wisconsin and this past weekend in Ohio State. So, yeah, again, I'm at the point where my heart says the men's team is out, and I would be willing to shift into experimentation mode with lines and whatnot. But I still think that the head says you can't make radical decisions quite yet. Like I'm feeling like after January, you got to go for it at that point. Meaning, throw it in a blender, pick names out of a literal hat at that point for your lines. I'm at that point for the women's team. And I'm at that point where throw Delmonico in the lineup.
Yeah,
I mean, it's beyond a joke at this point. You've already burned a year of a red shirt this year where she's just played the 2 games against Bemidji. So maybe that gives us some hope for this coming weekend, because apparently we're only comfortable playing her against the Beavers. But I mean, what else do we have to lose here?
Like, you're not going to lose any scoring punch. I mean, that's for sure. And that's kind of what my thought process is too. And you go back to that Bemidji series where we did shut them out. But it was, both games were 1-0. The second game was an empty netter by Farrell, but both games were 1-0. Sorio with the goals for both of them. And the first one was even a shorthanded one. And that was a shorthanded breakaway. That was kind of a fluke play in the second period. So that's why I'm like, Bemidji State might snake bite us if we're still in this scoring funk and we're not able to put the puck in the net. but we gotta shoot and create chances and crash the net and keep it simple and try to create some havoc, because I'm just not seeing it any other way for this team. And this is like just a big must sweep series, so we don't fall, to sixth. Now, does six mean we play Minnesota instead of Minnesota Duluth? I don't know. Maybe that's better.
I would rather not play Duluth. To be honest,
exactly.
because of the history of this team, especially in Duluth.
Especially in Duluth.
I would rather play Ohio State than Duluth at this point, even though I think Ohio State's better than Duluth is. We'll see, I guess, this weekend as Buckeyes play up in Duluth this coming weekend. But yeah, at this point, I mean, again, I hate bringing up rebuild, but if we're at this point in the season where I feel like, I mean, really mathematically, you're going to need to win the WCHA playoffs or tournament to get into the playoff or to get into the NCAAs. And I think the chances of that is like 0.001. I don't think that's going to be a possibility. I'm sorry to say it, but these can be interesting parts of the season. If I'm ever going to use rebuild, I'm not going to directly use it here, but in a sense, you can do something about, let's say, prepare for next year might be a better way to put it. But like I said, this is where you get players like Delmonico. You give them a chance to see you're almost like recruit or auditioning them for next year. It's like a rehearsal. And same goes to your goaltending. It's a fine line. Like you're not going to bench a Hola. There's also a balance between kind of honoring your seniors, your outgoing players. So I liked the fact that we got a game each from Carrico and Ahola this past week. And I think that should be the plan for the rest of the season. Giving Ahola the senior night start. You pay your homage to your seniors and fifth year players that have paid their dues. But I mean, Delmonico should be playing every game. Sydney Bryant, throw her in every game. See what you got. Okay, again, what is the downside of that? If you're going to lose other games, well, again, it's going to take a miracle to make the NCAAs at this point. And especially with Delmonico as being like, this year is just a null season. You're not getting any benefit from not playing her at this point. You're not getting this back 4 years from now in a redshirt situation. So you might as well get as much out of her as you can. Use these last 10, 12 games to see what she can get, and if she can get some experience going into next season. Same with Siri Urola. I mean, some of these players that haven't played every game. I mean, Marie Moran's played every game this season as a freshman herself. She scored in the Lindenwood series, the first opening series of the year, and she hasn't done anything since then. You can sit her down for a game or two. So I'm just saying, like, we can use this point in the season. I mean, you don't have to put it as you're putting up the white flag. It's just you're using this point in the season to see what you've got going forward. This year might not be the year you're going to finally break through in the NCAA. It will not be. I'll just say it. But that doesn't mean that this program doesn't need to be on an upper trajectory. I've had one too many beers, I suppose. But use this as a point where you can develop these young players into something going into next season where you'd rather have Delmonico have 14 games under her belt rather than just 2, for instance. I'm just using her as the example. Like, the next 12 games, are we really going to be using the production from Ali Qualley in these next 12 games to have any meaningful impact long-term on this program? Not really. So have a look towards the future and see what you've got in the tank and see what you've got in the years to come. I like from what I can gather from Adelsky's recruiting trail here. We've kind of mentioned it, targeting the northern Minnesota region, Roseau in particular. as a region, obviously him having his North Dakota background, probably an area where he's made a lot of inroads in terms of prep hockey up there. So that makes sense. And that gives me hope that he's going to be bringing some high-end talent to St. Cloud in years to come. And he's been active in the transfer portal. I would expect that to be the case this coming year, because we've got a fair amount of fifth years and seniors that are going to be coming off the roster at the end of this year. He's almost kind of required to do that, I think, at this point, just numbers wise. So we'll see. I'm confident about Adelski's ability. It still took him a couple of years to really set the foundation for his success at North Dakota. And if we can get that same kind of track record play out here, we're in good hands. It's just it's a shame, because this is frankly kind of ugly hockey that we're seeing on both sides here, the men's and the women's team. And I use the word boring for the men's team. You can use the same term here. It's not dynamic hockey, which is unfortunate.
And I'm looking at the front. I'm looking at the first line there for the women: Gentry, Zimmerman, Henderson. Henderson, 3 goals on the season, none since October. Zimmerman, 2 goals on the season, none since October. Gentry had a goal in November, and before that, none since the 4th game of the season. So it's like, and that's the top line that you're putting out there, and it's just absolute bagels down your top line for them for a majority of the season. And it's just something definitely needs to change when it comes to the squad, and to try to jumpstart, and like you said, try anything and everything at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Gentry, I do feel for her, because I think that she produces far less than what she deserves. Like, I'm looking at that 91 shots that she's put up this year. That's 22nd nationwide. I mean, again, we have to strain if we're looking for positive offensive stats for this team. But yeah, at 5.5% shot percentage, that's just snake bitten territory at that point. She is the type of player that, I've said this before, that she's not like she's a physical type of player. Power forward would be her the best way to describe her. So she's not like a natural Gretzky type. She's a Marchand type, I guess, to put it into her. She's heavy metal. She's not jazz. And I like that player profile in general, but I sort of had to maybe tamper my expectations. This was like last year. I'm just like, she's not naturally a 40-point type of player. But you feel like she's more than a 7-point player as well. And I do feel like she's been on the wrong end of some bad misfortune. But it comes down to production. We've said this about the men's team too. It comes down to, are you putting the puck in the net? If you're not, this is how we judge sports. This is how we define success at the level that we're at right now, and we're just not getting it done. And still time left, like I said, but the window for me is over, and I can enjoy these points in the season, because again, like, I'm not on pins and needles when I'm watching the game. I can sort of kind of relax, and the result is whatever. It's somewhat incidental. Obviously, I still want the Huskies to win as many games as they can. But I'm more looking at, let me see some of these young players. What can they do? And is this going to fit in? What's the puzzle look like for next year? And these pieces, how do they fit into that puzzle? I can enjoy this phase of a season from a fan's perspective, just in a different. Obviously, it's not my preferred phase to be in, but it's I can enjoy sports in a lot of different senses. So at least just give me something that I enjoy watching. That's what I'm really looking forward to here. Just give me some hope, if nothing else.
Indeed. Anything else around the women's side before we go to questions?
I mean, nothing that I did mention that Princeton beat Quinnipiac.
You did.
Quinnipiac ended up beating Princeton on Saturday, or excuse me, Yale ended up beating Princeton on Saturday, which was a bit of a tough loss for them. But they did move up a little bit. We did see Boston University, sort of on cue, lose a bad game. Was it to Vermont, I believe? It's the thing about Hockey East, like you lose to any team other than BC or UConn, Northeastern too. You lose to any other Hockey East team, it's going to sink you. And BU did see that happen to them. So right now they're outside looking in the pairwise, but that was not surprising to either of us. It's Clarkson had a better weekend, so they've moved up a little bit. But from the WCHA, no surprises. Basically chalk all the way down this past weekend, and yeah, we'll see. I'd like to see this team look like the dominant team. They can be over a team like Bemidji, but at this point, like we mentioned with like the first Bemidji series in particular, we didn't see that. Those were nail biters of games. Give me some goals. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah.
Just give me some goals. Like three of them. I'm not really asking for a lot. Just give me like 3 goals in a game.
A lot of the questions that I got were actually more about coaching. At what point do we start in the panic button about the coaching staff not making the necessary changes? I love Brett. I'm a little nervous about what's happening. And then also, how long until people realize that Larson can't coach and recruit anybody decent? Most draft picks get here do not improve over their time. How long until we actually look at what the problem here is, and it's not the players?
Well, part of it is the players. I mean, but the players were brought here by Larson and company. Yeah, it's Larson needs to show me something.
Yeah.
So we saw that, didn't realize it would take this quick for you to be proven true that David Carl was not going to coach the World Juniors.
Right.
Next year. Announced that he's not going to take the job. I don't know if that meant that he was offered it, but it's kind of implied. If he was offered it, he's getting in front of it and saying, I'm not going to take it. So he's not going to be coaching the World Juniors next year. From my perspective as a St. Cloud fan, I'd love it if Larson got the head coaching gig, because that seemingly would improve the reputational capital of the program. It's a good feather to have in your cap as a coach and as a team, as a school. Like you can say to recruits, you can be coached by national team head coach, U20s. That can backfire too if you lay an egg next year. That could backfire. But so as a St. Cloud fan, I think that would be intriguing. As a Team USA fan, I'm like, give me Greg Brown. I would rather have Adam Nightingale from Michigan State. Give me Jay Pandolfo. Give me Bob Motzko again. As a Team USA fan, there's a lot of different candidates I'd rather have than Brett Larson as the team, as the head coach of a World Juniors team.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And maybe that's just my gut reaction after one bad weekend, and maybe that's not incredibly fair for me to say. But I do wonder how much of it will be that, Carl's not coming back. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say, let's go down the list of the assistant coaches and offer it to them. But maybe, they do completely go another way with it.
I would assume he's going to be in the running.
Then Minnesota fans will be definitely like, if they crap out of the tournament, well, it's not because we didn't have a Minnesota head coach. So I think that's where
the Minnesota factor, which you brought that up last week about it being in Minnesota next year. I think that will factor into the ultimate decision.
I don't know how much Van Beesbrook and their brass
they
cares.
Might not.
I don't think they care at all. They just want to put the best coach out there. But I mean, with I don't know if it's reluctantness or stubbornness when it comes to Larson, but his inability to make any type of changes does worry me. And that's what it comes down to when it comes down to the in a short tournament in the U20s. Yeah, you're going to have to be able to be really quick on those changes. But Larson has not shown that he's able to do that during his time here at St. Cloud State, for better or for worse. And as of lately, it's been for worse. And he does need to be held accountable. And I think a lot of people now are starting to hold him accountable. That last question that I got from Rabid, he's been pretty much on the I hate Larson bandwagon for a few years now. So I think his chickens are coming home to roost right now. But it's I do definitely agree that it is concerning that you're having all of these swoons that are very predictable, and it doesn't feel like he's making the adequate changes.
Yeah, I like that we're having this discussion. When we first had one of these discussions a couple of years ago, I sensed that there was a bit of emperor's new clothes going on, where any sort of criticism of Larson was rejected out of hand. And it is, I think it's healthy as a fan base to have standards that you hold your players and your coaches, the main players in this program. I'm not saying literal players, but movers and shakers in your program, key individuals. And Larson is maybe the highest on that list in terms of important people with this Huskies hockey program. And maybe what has changed since that first wave of criticism that, again, I engaged in. I feel like the last few years, those second half swoons, I think that's playing into the fact that we have some more questions about coaching, is that there is a track record that we can look at this point where we have seemingly the same issue year in and year out at this point of the season, roughly. Again, the last couple of years, it started a little bit later than this, but in general, second halves have been a problem. And the fact that you haven't seemingly made the adjustments that, again, rubes like us, I hate saying it that way, but I feel like I don't need to be a doctor to realize if someone's bleeding out of their ears that they probably need to seek medical attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that you need to be an expert or a hockey coach to realize that the offense is stagnant on this team and needs an injection of something, some sort of change. Yeah. And I don't know, with the World Juniors, it was on my mind as well. I feel like Larson is probably best suited as an assistant coach, where he can focus on recruiting, which has always been his MO, and he can focus on one area of the game. When he was assistant for Duluth, he was the defensive coach. Apparently at the World Juniors, he was drawing up their power play, which was very good. There's a lot of moving parts as a head coach. You've got to deal with offense, defense, recruiting. You've got to deal with media responsibilities. There was a lot of hats to juggle. And not everybody is well suited for that. I think that I don't think he's a bad head coach, but I think he's probably closer to average as a head coach. And so, and he probably is better suited as being the second, like the number 2, as we've seen in the World Juniors. It's been a good role for him there. So I don't know. I'm not ready to say fire him. And I would want him to improve. I still think that his biggest strength is recruiting, although with guys like Salquist and Ross Perot and Ryman, there was a lot of dead weight. Ports, who wasn't technically a recruit, is a transfer portal pickup, but some of his recruits here the last couple of years have been more swings and misses. But you feel like with guys like Bernovic, Hall has been, not great, but above average in his year and a half so far. I think he's still above average when it comes to fielding a roster. But I'm less confident about that as I may have been at this time last year or 2 years ago. I made this point like their first year of coming back to the show, which is right on the heels of the 2021 title game appearance. I was pumping the brakes that year, just saying, be careful about looking too much into that run as any sort of validation of Larson. I mean, of any tournament. I always say you can't really look at the tournament, the NCAAs, as being an accurate reflection of college hockey because they're so random. It is a spin of the roulette wheel. But that year in particular, where you didn't have the pairwise and you had no fans in the building, I feel like a lot of fans kind of that was the Emperor's New Clothes effect. We were right on the doorstep of winning a national title. And I think from Larson's perspective, I feel like he has used that year to a degree that's hurt him, because I feel like he fell in love with the Will Hammer role from that year, and he feels like he needs to replicate that with his grinder type players. And Will Hammer was not a fleck in anybody's eye until, other than 3 games again in front of 1,000 people in Albany and Pittsburgh. And I feel like he's like, we gotta find our hammer. We gotta find these role players that do one thing, and we can use these interchangeable parts because everyone's got their specific assigned role. And that's why we get the Salquist love affair. We get the Rosborough. Let's give his line more minutes than anybody else. I feel like that, if anything, that run has had a negative effect on his next couple of years since then. And since that run, as much credit as you want to assign him then, 1 tournament win since then. And so, and like I said, 3 straight years, and we're looking at a 4th where a second half is collapse to a degree where you're able to save yourself 2 of those years. Last year, you weren't able to stop the bleeding. This year looks like you're hemorrhaging even earlier than the last couple of years. So I don't know. I need to see the coaching staff step up, because it ain't cutting it at this point.
And we've got Eric Chester with the great meme. Am I the only one at threat level Bobby? And it's King of the Hill, Bobby going, is it okay to feel like I don't want to live anymore? Yes, Bobby, that's normal. It's kind of where we're at right now. The Mitch lost 8 of our last 9 at Duluth. A lot of them just butt kickings in front of small crowds against Duluth. Having been playing well looks to be like a coaching issue, not having them prepared. And then I want to end it on well, first, Husky One also said, will Ports ever recover from playing, or will Thorson ever recover from playing with Ports and Salquist? And that's kind of what I talked about a little bit earlier as well. The user does say, I don't think it's hopeless that I see a foundation for next year and forward, but that will require those freshmen to score and or a better portal effort. I'm happy that this user sees a foundation for next year, because at this moment, I do not. I think it's shaky. From what I've seen on the ice so far, and obviously things can change, but as of right now, obviously I'm thrilled with how Brnovik is progressing and how he's been playing. But other than that, it's been tough.
Because again, those who want to rely on it's a rebuilding year. That implies that next year is going to be better than this year, and that you've got a good crop coming in. Nolan Road, Noah Ernest, perhaps he might be in juniors still. He's in juniors now, but he might be a year young. Tanner Hendricks, defensive prospect, drafted player. You've got some good prospects coming in. But I guess, from the perspective of this year, it's more the upperclassmen that are disappointing. Your sophomores and freshmen, Gross, Miettinen, Brnovik, and Hall are your 4 top scorers. They're all sophomores or freshmen in Brnovik's case. Really, the main culprit, it has to be Ingram, right? As far as disappointments this year.
Yeah.
It's not like people were banking on Ryan Rosborough to put up a great year points-wise. You can look at Sahlquist's 19-point season from last year and hope that he would build on that, but even I wasn't especially I can't say that I've really ever been a fan of Sahlquist, but always kind of skeptical of his output. So I wasn't expecting him to even return. And I thought 19 points was a shocker of a
that was
season for
an
him last year.
anomaly.
So not expecting him to necessarily top that output. There's just a lot of dead weight on the team. And like I said, Thorson's the one of the struggling bottom 6 guys that I have that I would categorize as a guy that's called future asset, let's say. Whereas I'm not saying that about a guy like Jack Ryman, for instance, or Jack Rogers. I will say this too, I didn't plan on me ruining an injury from Jack Rogers, because his absence might be enabling Ports to remain in the lineup, for instance. And I don't think this is another thing that I would have laughed at the beginning of the season if I would have said this, but I think it is a mistake to have redshirted Ocean Wallace, especially if we're going to be out from Ryan Rosborough at the center position. But Wallace is already 21, actually. He's got an October birthday, so he'll be turning 22 next year. But again, this kind of gets back to the rebuilding thing. You're really banking on Ocean Wallace's age 25 season. We're hip pocketing that and the cost of that is him sitting out this season, which again, I wouldn't have expected. Ocean Wallace, if he would have played this year, if he would have gotten 10 points, that might have exceeded the expectations. But 10 points on this team compared to Rosborough's 1 would be an improvement. So I think that was a minor mistake. Again, I'm not hanging the season on that mistake, or on that decision, let's say. But especially with the injury concerns that we currently see ourselves in, I don't know. It might even be, if you are in desperation mode, that's an option on the table. You could take that red shirt off of him this year. If you really wanted to, if you felt that it was that desperate. Again, I'm not sure if we're at that stage where we've got to rip a red shirt off Ocean Wallace. But that's another factor. It's just, I feel like we're graduating that dead weight this year And even if we're bringing in guys that maybe aren't going to be the highest end of prospects, I feel like we do have some intriguing guys coming in next year. It's just, I can't even forecasting next year's roster at this point is almost a fool's errand, because who knows what this roster will look like even before those guys get on campus. With all the portal moves, and now with this coming summer is when the OHL bonanza can start, or CHL bonanza, I should say. So if that factors in anything as well.
Now I have brass bonanza in my head.
I'm sorry about that.
So that's okay. You know what? I'm okay with it. So.
But life moves real fast in modern college hockey. You have no luxury of planning out 4 years in advance anymore. You might not be able to plan out 4 months in advance at this point. Mm-hmm. You've got to find out what you got now, and you've got to move with that. And if it ain't working, you gotta try something else. And we're at the point now where I feel like that's overdue at this point.
And then obviously I saved the last one for Dan Jacobson, who said he was getting his popcorn ready for this episode. So I hope it met his expectations. But he asked if Duluth can play St. Cloud every weekend.
I'm sure he loves that.
Exactly. So
again, I don't even have any like Duluth fire this week. It really wasn't about you, Dan. It was all about us.
It was all, exactly. So, I did give them a talk about Shagabe and the plants and how that might be a spark for them coming around for the next half of the season. So, but that about does it.
Let's have them. Let's get the plants to transfer to Michigan State.
There we go.
That would make me happy. As Isaac Howard had a 4-goal game this past weekend.
Right. Exactly. That about does her on this episode.
That about does her.
I'm Weldie at More Clappers, MOAR, More Clappers. And Andrew, you can find him at
Andrew, SCSU HHP, Mosey Verhoebe.
All right. Perfect. We'll be back next week. And until next time, go Huskies. Woo.